You've done a lot with dialogue so far. This video is specific to just the period versus a comma in speaking. So we're not even really looking at question marks or exclamation points. But remember, the only thing that you need to know about these are the only 4 punctuation marks that you will use inside of the quotation marks when someone is speaking. So what you're going to do, there's other fancy things. I don't want to say you're never going to use something else. Like if someone's being interrupted, there's things to do. But what we're going to look at specific on here is when do I use a period and when do I use a comma? Because that seems to be what people are coming up confused by, and that's fine. So here's where we're going to look. We're going to go down to this text right here for now. Okay, so here we go. So the teacher nodded understandingly. Poor you, it isn't easy to master calculus in middle school. So if you look at this right here before the dialogue, so it's either right before the dialogue or right after the dialogue, the writer chose to use a period. Here's why. The section before, where they made this just one sentence by itself, does not directly tie to the dialogue that follows it. So if it said the teacher nodded understandingly and said, then it would be a comma because it's tying directly to the dialogue. Okay, let's take a look at, now here's an exclamation point, so we're not worried about that one because that's one of our other punctuation marks. Let's go down to this text right here. Okay, we have both of the two that we're talking about. So here we have a comma, okay? Right, she said triumphantly, and then there's the period. So what happens is, if I can say this as a sentence and this as its own sentence, then I don't need the comma. But the comma is saying that this whole line right here is to be read as a single sentence. Okay, that is one subject, one predicate. It's all going together. Another way to think about it is this part after the comma, okay, sometimes it's before the comma, directly ties to the dialogue that's being said right before it. Okay, so if you have your character say, "No," said John, it needs to be a comma, not a period, because said John is directly linked to the dialogue that came before. Okay, same thing would be John said, comma, no. What came directly before the comma, they go together. Okay, including you. Now here they ended with a period. So my guess is that what comes after it is going to not be about the dialogue itself. It's not going to be how they said it or that. She motioned him back to his seat. So she's doing something completely different. Okay, so right, she said triumphantly, including you. She motioned him back to his seat. This right here can stand as a sentence by itself. It does not need the dialogue before it in order to be a sentence. She said triumphantly is directly discussing the way that it was said before. Let's take a look down here, and then we're going to be finishing up. Okay, so here is one. Yeah, comma, I said. I said is directly linked to the dialogue that came before it. Therefore, you use a comma. Okay, here's another one. It's a detonator, comma, said Matt. Notice that said Matt is directly linked to the dialogue that comes before it. Now, what we have here, sticking his head through the window and holding out the box for Susanna to see, period, we think. Now there's a period here because what came directly before the dialogue is not about this dialogue, and there's nothing after the dialogue. Therefore, we need to make sure that we just leave that one alone. Okay, we talked about this one up here. You can see that there's a comma here. Eric whispered. This is going directly back to that right there. This period, because said Jackie, goes right to it's not my fault. Okay, so you have to think period versus comma. If it's a question, you use a question mark. If it's an exclamatory statement, you use the exclamation point. But if you would put a period there, you have to then stop and think period or comma. Okay, do I have more that's part of this sentence? It's describing the way that this was said, or does each statement stand on its own? All right, please come see me for clarification. Again, we'll work through your writing. I just want to make sure that you have this available if you're wanting to take a look at it independently. Work.